Okay, thank you all for being here. My name is Torrey Jackson. I'm the president of the Bismarck Historical Society. We partnered with the State Historical Society of North Dakota to bring you this program this afternoon. We've been looking forward to this one. As many of you know, this year marks the 90th anniversary of the famous 1935 Bismarck baseball team that won a national championship at the National Baseball Congress in Wichita in August of 1935. That was the first racially integrated sports team to win a national championship in any sport, as far as I'm aware. The owner of that team, Neil Churchill, recruited a number of players from the Negro Leagues. People like Hilton Smith, Barney Morris, Ted Double Duty Radcliffe, Quincy Troup, and of course Satchel Paige, who I'm sure you've all heard of. So our speaker today is someone who's eminently qualified to talk about that era of baseball. He is one of the founders of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City. He is an award-winning author of, 9 or 10 books? 9 books, some of which will be available after the program, and he'll be signing, so pick some of those up. In many years in researching the Negro Leagues and the history of baseball in general, he has interviewed hundreds of former Negro Leagues players, their family members, their descendants, and he's been sharing that knowledge across the country and in Canada. In addition to his vast baseball knowledge, he's an accomplished trumpet player, and actually tonight he'll be playing the national anthem before the Larks game, and I'm told we might get a little sampling of his talents today. So we're very excited that he's here. Thankful he made the journey to North Dakota. Please welcome Phil Dixon.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be back in Bismarck. The last time I was here, believe it or not, was 10 years ago. And I was a young man then, I was 58. So here I am, I'm back again, and that's an honor. Also, I guess I'm one of these old timers now because of the team that won the national tournament 90 years ago. I'm one of the few people alive who interviewed Hilton Smith and Ted Double Duty Radcliffe. Who else did I get off of that team? Quincy Troup. And I went to their homes, so which is another unique thing. Most people, I was telling the crowd yesterday when I went to Hilton Smith's house, his wife had a bunch of French provincial furniture. And a lot of these young kids these days, they don't even know what kind of furniture that is. So times have changed, but it's an honor to be here today. So I'm going to dance through this program because I have to go down to the park, and I got to get there early to warm up my trumpet, right? We're going to warm up just a little bit here toward the end of the program. So just want to thank everybody for coming out. I will say when I came the last time, I didn't speak at Jamestown, but I was able to go to the park that was there. And if you ever have, I don't know if you've been to that park before, but if you have, that particular park they had the park that was built way before, but it burned down. And they loved the stadium so much that they built the stadium back with its original plans. And so it looks like the stadium that was burned down. And so when I came, I was just really fascinated because I've been to a lot of ballparks and nobody uses chicken wire. And if you look here, that was one I took through a home plate with chicken wire. And there's probably, I can only think of 2 parks in the country that I know of, and I've been a lot of places that have chicken wire. So I was kind of honored to actually use that in my program. So, yesterday I kind of prefaced because I try to give history every time I talk. And this area was a great place for African-American baseball players to come. And we're talking about even going back to the turn of the century. And they opened their doors. If you went down to some of the places in the South, black teams didn't even play white teams. But you could come up to North Dakota. You could not only could you play against white teams, but you might even end up on the white team. And so that was different. So there were some different things happen here, and I think that we need to talk about it, especially these days, because I think this is history that doesn't need to die. It's history that needs to be told. And so I'm glad you're here today. And hopefully when you walk away, you'll have some stories that you can tell your grandkids. I don't see any little kids in here, so you better go to work. I don't see any. Is there any little kids here? You know, when I say younger than 20, oh boy. Well, remember, guys, you are the teachers. If we don't teach these young people, baseball won't be alive. We love baseball, right? And that's one of the reasons you're here. And the only way we're going to get them to love baseball is we have to teach baseball to them. So next time you're around a young person, ask them, do you know what a grand slam is? And you'll be surprised. They think it's a special meal from Denny's. That's true. So have a little fun with them, and all of a sudden, you'll be the wisest person in the room. So we're going to jump through, and that's the first slide I'm going to do here. Okay, great. And today I've subtitled my program, The Giants. And the reason I did that, and I started a couple of years ago, is because a certain part of this time in our country, they didn't put black people's pictures in the newspaper. So these ball players that came here, rarely were there photographs in newspapers. And when the black teams came in, one of the ways that they identified there was going to be an African-American team is they began to call everyone the Giants. And so that giant name is an important name when you're doing research on the African-American teams. And I was sharing this, I share it all the time. When they organized the Negro National League in 1920, you want to remember that, they had 3 teams named the Giants in the league. Chicago American Giants, the Chicago Giants, and the St. Louis Giants. And it all comes from this history of the word Giants. So I'm going to start off with a little poetry today, and I'm going to jump into that. And then when I finish with this poetry, and whenever you're writing something, you're always thinking about something. So I'm going to kind of move through this program, get the Bismarck connection with what I was thinking about as I was writing this poem. And it's called Giants. It goes something like this. Giants, they came fast, they came slow, then disappeared like the last light of the sun in segregated America. And all we see is their glory. But it'll be lonely there when people have forgotten and there's no one left to share. After all, none of us are happy. These brothers were treated so unfair. You see, some Giants played for fame. They were athletes in a baseball game who tore their rotator cuffs, came up throwing. Some of them were down, some of them were crowned, some of them were lost and never found. But most had seen it all. They spent their life in touring cars and barnstorming buses, barnstorming for glory, but there was no one there to tell their story. In a town, few can recall, one of these Giants really slugged the ball. He had 5 hits, bases stolen, runs scored 3, bases stolen 4. I'd like to know where, I'd like to know more, but there was no one there to record this game. And for added shame, the newspapers didn't bother to print his name. Some Giants had arms of steel. Men would pay to see, so they put it on display. Some had great speed. Even I could watch them run all day. Some excelled at hitting ball with bat, and gee, their hitting was advanced. Young boys said, I could do that if I had half the chance. I could be a giant. Like Brian's men of age 25, young and alive, crowds watching them as they walked and laughed, then asked for memorabilia and autographs. In small towns and big cities too, people filled the stands and gave their approval with feet and hands while watching them play with ball and glove as young girls marveled at their physique and dreamed of kissing them on the cheek. But these men never could believe you truly loved them. Some Giants made it when they were old, after age 40, playing tricks on father time, still throwing baseballs over dimes, using a talent they still could share or a deep down soul they had to bear. But then they would tell you, I didn't have much then, but when I was young, you wouldn't let me in. But will we ever know the pain of living with a nickname you never owned? Coop Papa, Turkey, Double Duty, or Buck, a nickname on loan that somehow stuck. Or the many years of forgetting the only life you've ever known, life on the road, being away from home, or being the showcase. Oh, I could make a case to show these men were never paid the money their gifts were owed. These were men with names that will live beyond this day, men who play for the love of the game, regardless of the pay. These were the Giants who came fast, who came slow, then disappeared like the last light of the sun in segregated America. And all we know and all we can remember is their glory. But today, we're going to learn a little bit about their story. So thank you. I'm going to not stand behind that podium. I'm going to have some good time. And this gentleman doesn't hear well, so I'm going to stay close to him. Is that all right? So here we go. When I was thinking about this poem, I was thinking about a guy named Chet Brewer. You probably never heard of Chet Brewer, but you know his work. Believe it or not, Chet Brewer, not only did he play for the Kansas City Monarchs, he started off with a team called the Browns Tennessee Rats. They first came here around 1912, Walter Brown's team. And they were a minstrel show. So they had the minstrel show in the nighttime. In the daytime, they played a local team in baseball. They were Browns Tennessee Rats. But guess what? They didn't come from Tennessee. They came from Holden, Missouri. So he started out with the Browns Tennessee Rats, played for the Kansas City Monarchs. And he had like maybe about a 50-year career in black baseball. He was here actually in Bismarck. He played against the Major League All-Stars. Well, let's see. No, I used that one yesterday. He played against the Major League All-Stars in Jamestown, and he struck out Heine Manush, who's in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if you know these names. Struck him out 3 times. The guy, Heine Manush, had only struck out 28 times in the entire Major League season. That was Chet Brewer. But Chet Brewer, born in Leavenworth, Kansas, when he was about 4 years old, his foot was partially run over by a trolley car, and he lost 3 toes. And he would tell me this story all the time. And so he played his entire career with a handicap. It was the important foot, the foot you step down with into the hole when you're pitching. And so I went out to Los Angeles in 1987. I stayed with Chet Brewer for 3 days. We talked baseball for 3 days nonstop. He took me around to meet all these people in Los Angeles. And by the way, Chet Brewer had a team in Los Angeles. After he retired from baseball, and have you ever looked at any coaches? I went too far. Went way too far. If you ever have a coach who maybe you've had one guy who went to the major leagues, they're going to brag. Am I right on that? Well, how about this? Chet Brewer had 8 in 1 year. On one team, he had Roy White. You probably heard of him, outfielder for the Yankees. Bobby Tolan, National League stolen base leader. He had Bob Watson, scored baseball's 1 millionth run. Reggie Smith, Boston Red Sox, first baseball player I ever met. Major League Baseball player is Reggie Smith. Enos Cabell, somebody remember that? Don Wilson pitched for Houston. Maybe remember Don Wilson? He had all those guys, and he had the infamous Doc Ellis on one team, and that's Chet Brewer. So I go out to Los Angeles, and he's talking baseball for 3 days. And so when I left, and last night I said, Chet, I just need one favor for you. He said, what's that? I said, show me the foot. That sounds a weird request, doesn't it? But I grew up with people like Catfish Hunter. He was missing toes. Mordecai 3 Fingers Brown, they called him 3 Fingers for a reason. So here's my chance to see the foot. So I didn't pass. But that's the kind of interviews I do. I want to live this history, right? So I can say now that I'm the only person probably alive who saw Chet Brewer's foot. But he was a great man, and I hope someday he gets into the Hall of Fame. And then there were lots of games here. These are just some that I put here. I want to get a chance to highlight all these in just a presentation. But going back to 1905 when the Renville, Minnesota team came here. The All Nations came here. I'll tell you a little bit more about them. House of David came here. Tell you a little bit more about them. And of course, the Kansas City Monarchs came here. So this is just a little sampling. And of course, the last players who actually played on the Monarchs, who played here that I know of, were 2 guys who were on the Minot team in 1950. And you don't see these people too often, but one of them is George Wilson. George Wilson came here with actually he was from Palmyra, Michigan. And George Wilson came here and he was with the Renville team. And of course, George Wilson is a great player. He came here, no doubt about it. He pitched a 7-0 shutout. This guy, I found about 4 no-hitters he's pitched. He was a great one. He died in the mental hospital. He was hit in the head with a baseball and never was good after that. And so he's buried in Palmyra, Michigan. And then, of course, Walter Ball came here. Walter Ball played for Grand Forks in 1901, played for Grand Forks. He was their star pitcher and one of the best pitchers in the region. He only played on white teams until 1903, and he went to Chicago, and then he started playing on black teams. Never played on black teams growing up. He was always playing with mixed teams. Walter Ball. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Thing about Walter Ball is the Negro National League was started in what year? Somebody know? Remember this year, 1920. The first game that was ever played in the in the new Negro National League, it was Indianapolis against the Chicago Giants. Walter Ball pitched that day for the Chicago Giants. He pitched in the first Negro National League game ever. But he was here way before that. Then, of course, you probably heard of the Kansas City Monarchs, right? Well, they came here in different years. And 1932, when they got to Jamestown, you can't come to Jamestown without coming to Bismarck, right? So they came to Bismarck also in 1932. And this is an early picture. This is actually 1920 of the Kansas City Monarchs. Remember that year, 1920. We're going to touch on it several times. And of course, the president of the league was a gentleman by the name of Andrew Rube Foster. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rube Foster. Rube Foster is a member of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, but in 1905, they said this guy won 51 games. And I've been able to verify about 45 of them. So they weren't lying. He won 51 games. And so this is a great player, but of course, later on, he becomes an administrator and he starts and becomes president of the first Negro National League. Great stories behind Rube Foster. And of course, this is one of my favorite players named Carroll Ray Motho out of Topeka, Kansas. Interesting story about Mr. Motho. I met Mr. Motho in 1980. I'm 23 years old. And I met Mr. Motho. And at that particular time, I knew a lot about baseball. I was one of these whiz kids who could tell you all about Major League Baseball, batting averages. I knew everybody on every team. And they didn't move around like they do now. So that was easy back then, right? And I collected baseball cards. So I knew a lot. I read the books and things like that. I was really interested in baseball. Excuse me. So I spoke to Mr. Motho, and we talked about baseball. And 1 week later, he passed away. But he had no family. And he told the lady who was a nurse that came by the house, and she was a family friend, he said, when this guy comes back, give him all of my photographs. And those are the first photographs that I picked up from the Negro Leagues. And at that time, once again, I'm 23 years old. There were only 4 books on the Negro Leagues at that time. There's about 400 now. There's about 4 books. And so now I got all these pictures. I'm trying to figure out, what do you do with all this, right? But in looking through this whole file of things he gave me, I saw actually his passport. He had gone to Japan with an African-American team in 1932. So his passport was there. And I noticed his birthday. His birthday was August the 13th. I put it up here. August the 13th, right? Guess when my birthday is? August the 13th. And my wife is up there. She's sitting on him. Raise your hand. You'll see her. She'll be walking around here. We'll be married 41 years this year. She's heard a lot of baseball stories. But guess when her birthday is? August the 13th. Important day, important man. Carroll Ray Motho, not in the Hall of Fame, probably will never be, but he's a Hall of Famer in my life. And every time I go to Topeka, Kansas, I make sure I stop by the cemetery and leave some flowers because he changed my life. And of course, I played baseball growing up. Now, there's 2 images there. I'll talk to the first one. The first one is a guy by the name of Sherman Roadblock Jones, pitched for the 1962 Mets. They picked him up in the expansion draft. He was with San Francisco Giants. But by I'm going to say maybe 1967, he's retired from baseball, and he's living in Kansas City, Kansas, where I live. And so the first time I put on a uniform, that was the guy who put me in the uniform. And the interesting thing about him, he would sit around, and these old guys, they could tell baseball stories. And for me, I would listen. I don't know about the other guys. I would listen. And he used to say one thing about Casey Stengel. Casey Stengel's philosophy, how can you tell a good manager from a bad manager? Casey Stengel, you've heard of Casey Stengel, right? Right. Casey Stengel was originally from Kansas City. That's what the KC was supposed to be, but they changed the spelling, right? So anyway, Casey Stengel said the way you tell a good manager from a bad manager, he said a good manager knows how to keep the guys who hate him away from the guys who are undecided. That's Casey Stengel. And Casey Stengel would go to sleep on the bench, and he had a lot of great stories about Casey Stengel. So I actually learned baseball from a guy who learned baseball from Casey Stengel. I thought that was quite an honor. And then, of course, I collected baseball cards. I originally started off not with baseball cards, but with Beatles cards in 1964. Beatles were hot in 64. They came to America. Somebody remembers that, right? They were on Ed Sullivan. They even did a concert in Kansas City. Their last show. Charlie Finley paid big time money because his daughter was a Beatles fan and he had the money, so he paid them to come and do a show in Kansas City. And it wasn't on their schedule. So anyway, I collected Beatles cards. I made a mistake of taking them to school, and the teacher took my Beatles cards. I know, heartbreaker. And I had worked so hard that summer, I had to go to the store for a lady named Miss Davis, and she would always have me buy skim milk and snuff. And I go back to the store to buy more Beatles cards, and they're sold out. The only thing left is those ridiculous baseball cards. So I started collecting baseball cards. I collected non-sports, anything that had a picture on a card, I started collecting. And by the time I was 19 years old, somebody printed an article about me, this young African-American guy who had over 100,000 baseball cards. And back then, you couldn't buy a whole set in a box. It wasn't that kind of thing. You had to go and buy those packages for a nickel. I even remember penny pack. I don't know if you remember those. And you had a penny pack and a stick of gum. So I chewed a lot of gum. But I always like to tell the story. I have figured out one thing that helped me get a lot of cards pre-1964. And whenever a teenage boy in my neighborhood found out about girls, I visited his house and got his cards. It works. It worked for me. So anyway, that's just kind of, and if you look at that one that Sandy Koufax, the 55 Koufax that's in there, you know how much that thing is worth? I hate that I sold it. I don't have it anymore. But anyway, yeah, that thing is probably a $10,000 card. Yeah, so those are some real collectibles. But that was me. And guys, I had a little more hair back then. Then, of course, I like to talk about some of the people who came through here. This is one guy, John Donaldson. I don't know if you've ever heard of John Donaldson. He was up for the Hall of Fame this December. He didn't get in. I've been disappointed. In 2021, I was part of the Hall of Fame team who made the ballot. And I fought to get him on the ballot as the last guy. He didn't get in then. In 2006, I turned in a lot of information. Me and 4 other guys who put things together for John Donaldson. We had 4,000 strikeouts at that time. He didn't get in then. Now, a guy named Pete Gordon has kept on going. Now he has 5,000 strikeouts. He's still not in. So we're going to keep pushing for John Donaldson. But guess what? He came here. And he was from Glasgow, Missouri. I've been there on the river down there. And that's one of the things I love, going to these places where these ball players really live. And he didn't come from a big city, though. But he came here he's actually came to Jamestown. And he struck out 18 batters in Jamestown in a game. But this guy did this all the time. And the first time he came here was in 1916. So he was actually here and in this region. So this is John Donaldson, is an old guy. And this is when he came up in 1916. I guess he had an off night. He only struck out 12. And they're talking about how great a player he was. And so he was there, and there was another Hall of Famer on the team, a Cuban by the name of Jose Mendez that played with the All Nations. Now, I don't know how much you know about the All Nations, but the All Nations were started by J.L. Wilkinson. I'm going to highlight him in a minute. But so Mendez is in the Hall of Fame, and he was a great Cuban pitcher, but not Donaldson. But when they came here, they didn't hit too good. I think Mendez was 0 for 3 in the first game, 0 for 4 in the next game. Neither one of them got a hit that day. So the pitching here must have been pretty good. And then, of course, when you start baseball, somewhere along the way, you've got to learn about other people, right? So the first baseball player I ever read about, I was at elementary school, and it was in our reader, and it's a guy named George Herman Ruth. And I always like to tell the story. If they had told me he had 714 home runs, it wouldn't have mattered. You had told me he had 1,800 hits, that wouldn't have mattered, because I didn't really know that much about baseball. But then they said he ate 21 hot dogs between the doubleheader. I didn't even know what a doubleheader was. But I know what 21 hot dogs were, right? It'd take me a month to eat that many. And just like that, I became a Babe Ruth fan. I like to tell the story in 1927, Babe Ruth made $200,000, which was more money than the President of the United States. And they asked Babe, they said, hey, Babe, do you know you made more money than the President of the United States? And Babe said, why not? I had a better year. And then you always have a favorite player. Dick Allen was my favorite player. I don't know how anybody know anything about Dick Allen. You just raise your hand if you do. Yeah, Richie. Yeah, that's right. He started off as Richie, and he made the reporters change it back to Dick. And when I met him, I said, "Why'd you make them change your name?" He said, "Because my mother never called me Richie." And that's the kind of guy he was. He could be a real stubborn kind of guy. And part of it, he was unhappy because in 1964, they sent him down to Little Rock, Arkansas as the only black player in the league. And people would come and they would put all kind of negative things on his car. He was a star player, but they didn't really protect him when they sent him down there by himself. So he was always bitter with that. So when he came up to the big leagues, he had, you might say, he had a salty attitude. And so by the time I picked him up, I thought that was his normal attitude. I knew nothing about his history. So I tried to be like Dick Allen. And when I met Dick Allen, I said, Dick, you got me kicked off of more teams trying to be like you. And he got a big kick out of that. But Dick Allen's favorite thing was the first time he played on AstroTurf, Houston Astrodome. And somebody came and said, hey, how you like this new AstroTurf? He said, if a horse can't eat it, I don't want to play on it. He's a great guy. He died in 2020, but guess what? He's going to the Hall of Fame next month. So he's been, yep. And I've been writing Hall of Fame letters. I say, you can't keep nominating people after they die, Pete Rose, for example, and waiting until people are sick to put them in the Hall of Fame. Dave Parker, he had Parkinson's, and he passed away this month, what, last month maybe? Time's going by fast. And so he won't be able to see it. He knew he's in the Hall of Fame, but he won't be able to actually be there that day. So hopefully we can get some things better, done better at the Hall of Fame. And of course, when I was talking about one of these giants playing in town, no one can recall, and they really slugged the ball. I was thinking about James Papa Bell. He told me at one time, he said, you know, one year I stole 175 bases in a season. I said, that's amazing. I've never seen the record. He said, you won't, because they kept leaving the scorebook. So it never was a record. But this was back about maybe 1980, 81, somewhere in there. And when he told me this story, and I didn't know of anybody ever stealing that many bases. And then all of a sudden, a guy named Vince Coleman came along. Stole like 140 some odd bases in a minor league season. And then another guy named Billy Hamilton played for the Minnesota Twins. Somebody remember you? Last played for the Minnesota Twins? He stole like 150 something bases in a minor league season. So I know Papa Bell was right. And Papa Bell, you know, his famous saying was, Satchel Paige said he could turn off the lights and get into bed before the room got dark. You heard that? And the first time I heard that, it was Muhammad Ali saying it. And I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't know that he didn't make that up. And so Satchel Paige did. I'll tell you a little bit about Satchel Paige in a minute. So Satchel Paige made that up, but Satchel Paige had a quote. He said, age is mind over matter. And this guy had pitched in the major leagues. He was 59 years old when he pitched his last game in the major leagues. And he said, age is mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. I said, that's a great quote. Of course, he didn't make that up either. He borrowed that from Mark Twain. So you got to keep up with these quotes. Watch where you get your quotes from, guys. Do a little research. But that was Cool Papa Bell. And once again, I was a little bit younger then, but I'm honored to have actually known the man. And his wife was a real big supporter of mine, Clara Bell Thompson. And they were married for 62 years. So then, of course, another team came through here. If you ever watched the Minnesota Twins on several occasions, they've worn the St. Paul Gophers uniform. Well, this is the St. Paul team. Guess what? They were here in 1911. Interesting thing, when you find out these teams are here, a lot of times I don't know where they stayed. And so that's the information I'm always looking for to see where they stayed. And it's difficult to find. But they were coming here all the time. And you can see this is not a ragtag group here, guys. These teams were very organized. And they were together. There was one African-American team, they had 5 different uniforms that were interchangeable. So they could come out with 5 different uniforms. They played a 5-game series. They had 5 different uniforms every day. And they played a 6-game. It was like a mystery which one they're going to change it with. The major leagues still do that now, but they were doing this at the turn of the century. And then, of course, I was talking about some guys made it when they were young. They played the game for fun in a world that was never ready to accept them. And I was thinking about this guy, George Giles, but I was thinking about several people. And being a baseball fanatic as I was growing up, they used to tell me the youngest ball player who ever played in the major leagues was, somebody knows, Joe Nuxall. He's 15 years old. Can you imagine that? Somebody 15 years old coming up to the big leagues? That ought to be an outlaw. Yeah, there you go. We got a baseball fan up here. Well, you remember how they merged the Negro League statistics with the Major League statistics? I'm a part of that project too. And when we merged those statistics, and they became official, and it changed a lot of things because now the Negro Leagues are considered major leagues. But they were always major leagues, but they weren't recognized as that, right? I was writing the Hall of Fame in 1984, and they have letters, me trying to tell them, these guys are major league. They didn't believe me then, but now they believe me. So anyway, Joe Nuxall is now not the oldest. It's a guy named Roy Campanella, who was also 15. And I don't know if he missed a day out of school, but he's definitely the new guy now. So that all history just changed right before us. And so those are some of the things that, if you follow the statistics, there's going to be a lot more coming in that area. But we're living in a unique time. So we're trying to make some things happen. So anyway, this guy here, the one here on your left, that's Owen Spalding. He came here and played with the Gilchrist and Union Giants. Of course, George Giles came here and he played with the Kansas City Monarchs. And I have pictures like this all the time. And I always ask them, who are those ladies in the picture? And they always say the same thing. I have no idea. So got a chance to meet them. And of course, you probably heard of Josh Gibson. Okay, if you haven't, you better get to know about Josh Gibson. Who was the last guy to bat 400 in the major leagues? My old school people. Yeah, they're old school. Now go old school for me. Yep, Ted Williams. That's what we all grew up with. But guess what? That's changed now too. This guy batted like 443. Some incredible things. Josh Gibson. And so he's new on the list, right? And so I thought I need to introduce you to Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson, there was a game he played in Kansas City. Jesse Williams, the shortstop, told me the story. He said before the game, he went up and he found a broken bat in the bat rack. And it had tape on it and tacks in it. So he went up to Josh Gibson. He said, "This must be your old broken bat." And Josh Gibson said, "I don't break bats, I wear them out." That was Josh Gibson. Great home run hitter. But guess what? He died at age 38. You can imagine that. And they said he hit over 800 home runs. So I've had the pleasure of writing about him on many occasions. But most people have never seen Josh Gibson. So played for the Homestead Grays, by the way. And of course, Remember the saying I said about, I don't break bats, I wear them out? Well, I was down in Birmingham last year, and I noticed they had that saying, and I had written that in a book in 1992. And so guess what? That saying lives on just because you put it in a book. And so that's one of the things that I've had the honor of doing. And that was the game in Birmingham where the San Francisco Giants played the St. Louis Cardinals last year. It was a great game on where Willie Mays died that same weekend. It was a great time to be there. A lot of memorable things. And that's me standing by another photograph of Josh Gibson. And of course, I don't know how much you know about the Kansas City Monarchs. This gentleman right here, J.L. Wilkinson, he was co-owner of the Kansas City Monarchs with T.Y. Baird. And when they started the Negro National League in 1920, all the teams in the league were all black players and all black owners except for one team, and it was the Kansas City Monarchs. And these are their two owners. So let's spend just a moment on the two owners. J.L. Wilkinson, the first team he organized, and he was working out of Algona, Iowa, was the Bloomer Girls. He felt that ladies ought to be playing baseball. He believed in gender equality in baseball. So he had ladies play. His famous player was a lady who went by the nickname of Carrie Nation, not the Carrie Nation. The Carrie Nation was in the town I lived for 30 years. She's buried there in Belton, Missouri, but not that one. And anyway, Carrie Nation. And he had three guys that put on wigs and dressed up like girls and did the pitching. I always like to say, don't ask me where they went to use the restroom. And that was J.L. Wilkinson. He also organized the all-nation team that had all nationalities on the team. So he went and got John Donaldson from Glasgow, Missouri, who had been with the Tennessee Rats. He got Jose Mendez, the famous Cuban ball player. He got Plunk Drake out of Sedalia, Missouri. He got a guy named George Crow, a Native American Indian, had him. A guy named Steno, Italian player. He was out of Kansas City. So he had all these guys, and he also picked up an Asian player, a Japanese player, who became the first ever professional Japanese player. And guess what? They came here, 1915. That was J.L. Wilkinson. But most people know him as the father of night baseball. And when he came to Jamestown in, I think it was 1912, they played a night baseball game in Jamestown in 1912 under arc lights. They probably weren't that good. Probably the lights in here are better than what they were playing under. So anyway, that's how it got started. So he started way back trying to experiment with this. But by 1929, he heard that Haskell Indian College in Lawrence, Kansas had put in lights to play football. So he took the Kansas City Monarchs down to Lawrence, Kansas, had them turn on the lights. He said, I love this idea. And the next year, he mortgaged his home to create a fleet of trucks. It was only 5 trucks, a heck of a fleet. And but they had a jackknife construction they could pull in any town, and they had generators, and within 2 hours, they could be playing night baseball. And they went all across the country. And he was so proud of this. Now, the major leagues didn't like the idea. Van Johnson, the president of the major league, said, night baseball will never last. It's just a passing fad. And J.L. Wilkinson said that lights will be the baseball what talkies are the movies. The movies had just started talking with Al Jolson's the jazz singer. So we know who was right on that, right? And to show you how things go, this crowd is a good crowd. Most of us, the first time we saw a World Series game, it was played in the daytime, right? Did you know that the first year that all the games in the World Series were played at night was 1985? Did you know that? It was the Kansas City Royals against who? St. Louis Cardinals. And happened in Kansas City. Now, is that coincidental or what? So that was the first time it happened. First time they ever played a night baseball game in the World Series in 1971. It took that long for Major League Baseball to adapt to night baseball. All right? But J.L. Wilkinson knew it all the time. Tom Baird was his co-owner. Tom Baird went by T.Y. Baird because he didn't want people to know his family name. And it was T.Y., it was Thomas Younger Baird. And when you put Younger with Kansas and Missouri, what do you get? Now, somebody's watched a Western from time to time. Cole Younger, right. Those are his relatives. Yeah, he was from Pinnacle, Arkansas. He came to Kansas City, Kansas, my hometown. That's where he's buried, in Kansas City, Kansas. And where you're born at makes a big difference, right? I would tell you, I'm going to just jump and then I'll jump back. The Negro Leagues Museum is in Kansas City. Now, what's interesting about that, in I want to say maybe 82 it was, they were trying to start a museum in Ashland, Kentucky. So I went down to Kentucky to see what they had. Remember, I'm 23 years old, right? I don't know, well, no, by then I was 23 and 80, so I'm 25 then, right? I'm getting old. So I go down to see what they had, and so I get there, and they had a lot. And I said, that's interesting. I said, but it's up in the sticks. I said, this is not where we should put a museum. So I said, there's only 3 places, Kansas City, New York, or Chicago. I'm from Kansas City, so where you think it ended up? In Kansas City, right? Later on, Buck O'Neill and a few other people joined on. And a lot of people think about Buck O'Neill. They don't even think about me anymore. But the interesting thing was when we signed the incorporation, Buck O'Neill signed it first. He was the oldest. And right under Buck O'Neill is the youngest guy, and it was me. That was in 1990. So the museum is one of Kansas City's biggest tourist attractions. If you ever get there, and if I'm in town, if you follow me and you say I'm coming in, if I'm in town, I'll give you a tour. All right? Free of charge. Okay. So that's T.Y. Baird. And then, of course, the guy in the middle, I don't know how much you know about donkey baseball. Donkey baseball. If you go on YouTube and put in donkey baseball, you can actually see it being played. This is the man who created donkey baseball. He was also the road manager for a team called the House of David. I don't know if you know much about the House of David. Actually, these are the lights. This is the truck that J.J. Wilkerson put together. And they were trying to be the first to play night baseball. And so J.L. Wilkerson had the truck, but Independence, Kansas has started putting permanent lights. A guy named Lee Kaiser out of Des Moines, Iowa, he had a franchise down there. And so they put permanent lights in. And the Monarchs got rained out for a few nights. And so Independence, Kansas was the first ones to actually play modern night baseball game. And they played the Independence producers played the House of David in that game. So this is all baseball history. And if you follow baseball history, I know we got some old school baseball players. When they say it was the first Major League night baseball game? 1935, Cincinnati Reds at Cincinnati's Crosley Field. Even though I can tell you that the House of David played a night baseball game there in 1931. And let's see, what do I have here? Okay, I jumped across. This is a game in 35. And of course, we're talking about the 35. This is 90 years since they had the tournament team, right? Just a little bit on the tournament team. I don't know how much you know about the tournament team. It was a mixed team. So they had some guys who had played in the Negro National League. Some of them, I think, some came from the East, some came from the South, but they were playing black baseball. And Churchill got those guys up here. Satchel Paige was the main one that most people remember, right? But he got those guys up here, and they joined about 5 other white guys. So they played well, and they cleaned up everything in this area. And so they went down to the first tournament, National Baseball Congress tournament, that is still going on to this day. They went through there, and they cleaned up everything. They even picked up Chet Brewer on the way. So they were about to lose any game. They got Chet Brewer, they got Satchel Paige, and they got double duty Ratcliffe. They called him double duty because he could pitch the first game of doubleheader and then catch the second one. Damon Runyon, a great sports writer, called him double duty after seeing that. So they go down there, they cleaned up everything. They won the tournament and won all the big money. Satchel still holds the tournament record for the most strikeouts, which is 60. And in one tournament, Ted Double Duty Ratcliffe holds the put-out record. If you're a catcher, you get to put out. So he holds that record. And it was 59. I guess he missed one. And so those are records 90 years later haven't been broken. They were so good that the next year the tournament said, no more mixed teams. Do not bring any more mixed teams down here. So the next year, Satchel Paige went to Denver, to the Denver Post tournament. And he took a catcher with him named Bill Perkins. And there was a guy who was the manager of the House of David team by the name of Grover Cleveland Alexander. And the Monarchs were entered in that tournament, and so was the House of David. And Grover Cleveland said, there's only one way I can beat the Kansas City Monarchs. He said, get me Satchel Paige. Of course, guess who won the tournament? You know the House of David won. They got Satchel Paige. They got Satchel Paige. They won the tournament. And that was a mixed team because they only had 2 black players, a battery. But the important thing is they didn't want a mixed team. They didn't want a black team. Now, you could be a black team and play or a white team to play, but no more mixed teams. And that held for a couple of years. So that's kind of interesting history. But you can see some of the great things that went on. There's so much. I don't know. There's some good books written about the 35 team. If you haven't seen them, go check them out at the library if you don't want to purchase them. But there's some good things written. Satchel Paige, the last game that they played, they won the tournament, and then they went down to McPherson, Kansas. And the team, this is the last game the Bismarck team played. So they go down to McPherson, Kansas. And so Satchel decides he's going to really have some fun. He looked at these guys. He said, they can't hit worth nothing. So he said, everybody leave the field. Just leave me and the catcher. And he struck out the side on 9 pitches down in McPherson, Kansas. And that's kind of important. And this is the House of David. If you've never seen the House of David before, this is the House of David. And they were a religious colony out of Benton Harbor, Michigan. I don't know if you know anybody from Benton Harbor? You hear Sinbad, the comedian? He's from Benton Harbor. I've been to Benton Harbor, been to their colony, and I'm in a documentary they have. It's called House of David, Life Everlasting. Benjamin Parnell, who was the leader of the House of David, said, if you join us, you will never die. Of course, he died in 1927. But they didn't bury him, though. He's still above ground in a glass sarcophagus inside the Diamond House. Now, I didn't see him myself when I was there, but I know some people who did restoration on the house, and they took pictures and they showed me. The guy is still there. And that's Benjamin Parnell. And great history on the House of David. They were vegetarians. They believed that they were going to be one of the 144,000 that rule, from here to eternity. And so they believed all of that. And so they had how they promoted their colony was through baseball and through music. They had a really good jazz band too. So, and if you go to Benton Harbor, it's still there. Now, what's interesting is all the people in the colony died out. Because if you joined the colony and even if you were married, you couldn't have sex with your wife because remember, it's the end times religion. So why you have kids if we're going to be all over soon? So nobody had kids except the people who left and went back to town. Those people had children, and those children are the ones who run the colony today. So I had the honor of going there, and I was in that documentary, and a guy recognized me. It was easy to do. I'm the only black guy in the documentary. And he gave me a tour of the whole place, and I was talking to another guy in that same town. He said, nobody ever gets that tour. And when I left there, I'll never write about the House of David the same. I was just amazed by all the things that they were doing. They invented the automatic pin stacker for bowling. They invented the waffle cone. How about that? So that's the House of David. And of course, their star pitcher they had in 1931 was Grover Cleveland Alexander. And he joined the team in 1931 after an illustrious major league career where he won 373 games, still holds the National League record for the most shutouts. And all he had to do was come pitch 1, maybe 2, at the most 3 innings a night because he's got to pitch every single night because everybody wants to face Grover Cleveland Alexander, and that's who they're coming to see, right? But some nights he couldn't come out and pitch, and I'll just say this. The reason he couldn't pitch, he was known to take a nip. Somebody knows what that means. And that was Grover Cleveland Alexander. And I was in Cooperstown. They had a great picture on the wall, so I decided to take a picture by there. And just imagine this. If you're here in Bismarck, right, 1935, just imagine you could have seen a pitching matchup, Grover Cleveland Alexander against Satchel Paige. Somebody saw that right here. And that's amazing, isn't it? You know, they didn't see this in New York. They didn't see this in Chicago. They saw it in Bismarck, North Dakota. That's just amazing. All right. And there actually, Dizzy Dean had a brother that was on the House of David that year, Elmer Dean. And I've written about him in my Dizzy Dean book. It's a fascinating story, too. And of course, I thought I'd let you know, Satchel Paige, I mentioned him several times, right? Satchel Paige, he's buried in Kansas City. There's a little poetic thing on the back of his monument. And the guy who wrote that, well, he's the one that's cleaning it off. That's me. I always tell people, one mistake I made, I didn't put my name on it. So at least you guys, you know I wrote it, right? So you heard me say it. And then some of the guys who played here, I just thought I'd mention a few of them over the years. Hilton Smith played here, and they're all buried in different places. Bacon Brown is buried in Independence, Kansas. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. Ed Dwight, a neighbor of mine, he's buried in Kansas City, Kansas. Charlie Hancock, who was famous up in Jamestown, he's buried in Sioux City, Iowa. Sioux City, South Dakota. And Quincy Troop, buried in St. Louis, Missouri. And I had the honor of interviewing several of those. Johnny Vivens is one you don't get here talk about very much. He came from the same hometown as John Donaldson, Glasgow, Missouri. And he wanted to be another John Donaldson. He was a lefty, and he's pretty good. He's pretty good, but once again, these names you never hear. Of course, I'm going toward the end here. Dizzy Dean. Dizzy Dean, 1934, Dizzy Dean and his brother Daffy Dean, they won over 50 games pitching for the St. Louis Cardinals. And then after the World Series, they beat the Detroit Tigers. They could have gone home. Instead, they played 12 games against Negro League teams. And after they finished that series, they asked Dizzy Dean, who was known to brag on himself, said, "Who's the greatest pitcher you ever saw?" And Dizzy said, "There's a color boy named Satchel Paige." He said, "If you could get him and me on the same team, we could win the pennant by the 4th of July and go fishing to the World Series start." And that's Dizzy Dean. He married a lady who was 10 years older than he was. And so you will never see Dizzy with any showgirls because she forbade that. And her name was Pat. And I always like to tell the story. Pat said, I met Dizzy on one night. We went out the next day for our first date. The next day he asked me to marry him. And the next day we got married. She said, when I tell people that, they think I'm Dizzy too. Then, of course, there's Satchel Paige here. What did I put here? Here's Satchel Paige. The first time he came to Bismarck, 1933. And so he was good then. Played American Association All-Stars, and they won 15-2, North Dakota. Bismarck, Satchel Paige. He was in this area. Very popular around this area, Satchel Paige. He was the oldest rookie in Major League Baseball history, age 42. Oldest player to ever play in the major leagues, age 59, 1965. Pitched 3 innings against the Boston Red Sox, gave up 1 hit, a double to Carl Yastrzemski, and he struck out one guy, the pitcher, Bill Mumblecat. I know these names because I collected baseball cards, guys. And of course, they brought Satchel Paige back over and over again. 1950, he came up to Minot, pitched 3 consecutive days. And this is how they were drawing crowds. And Satchel Paige was always a favorite up here. And you see the first game, he surrendered 2 hits in 3 innings. Second night, 0 hits in 3 innings. And then the last night, 1 hit in 3 innings. And Satchel Paige, remember, he came up with the Indians in 46 as a 42-year-old rookie. This guy's nearing 50. He's still good. And of course, in black baseball, and I mentioned about the nicknames in my poem, I don't know if anybody follows the Royals. Anybody follow the Kansas City Royals? They have a catcher. What's his name? Salvador Perez. Anybody know his nickname? I can tell there's no Royals fans up here. Salvi. He was just in the All-Star game, by the way. But they call him Salvi. That's not how you got your nickname in the old days. It used to be a couple of veteran guys on the bench. And they would watch you play. They watched what you ate. They knew where you came from. They watched everything you did, how you dressed, and everything. And that's how you got your nickname. And this guy right here, I have, he was trying out for the Montgomery Gray Sox. And he's out shagging balls in the outfield. And 2 old guys are looking at this guy and they said, "Man, look at that guy. He runs with his chest stuck out." And other veteran guy said, he looked like a turkey. He said, yeah, that'll be his nickname, Turkey Stearns. And Turkey Stearns is in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame today. So there's an origin to all these nicknames. Just know that. And you could write a whole book about nicknames, right? And even if you don't know anything about baseball, you know something about nicknames, right? So if I was to mention Babe, you know who that is, right? Even if you don't know his real name. You ever Connie Mack? Connie Mack? You heard of Connie Mack? You know his real first name? Cornelius. Yogi Berra? We won't keep on going. But you get my point. You know the nicknames, even if you're not much or just a novice baseball fan. So anyway, I was writing my book, and I did bring some of those. I wanted to spotlight Wilbur Bullet Rogan, who I happen to think was the greatest all-around baseball player that ever lived. That's the one who could hit and pitch. So when I was coming along as a kid reading baseball books, who did they say the greatest all-around baseball player who could hit and pitch? Who did they say it was? Babe Ruth, that's right. Not Pete Rose, he couldn't pitch. But he's a darn good hitter. Yeah, he did everything else, that's true. So, but Babe Ruth could pitch, right? So they said that's the greatest all-around player. So I'm just a kid from Kansas collecting baseball cards, but I happen to know a little bit about how to make a convincing story. So here's my convincing story. Bullet Rogan, how does he compare with Babe Ruth? Well, first of all, nowadays, there's a guy named Shohei Ohtani, right? They compare him to Babe Ruth, and sometimes they forget Rogan, right? So anyway, Bullet Rogan hit over 400 home runs in his career. Babe Ruth in the major leagues hit 714, right? He had more. Babe Ruth 6'2", Rogan 5'7.5". Many times Rogan would hit a home run, and he won over 400 games. So he would hit a home run, pitch a shutout, and practically win his own baseball game. And he was a 300 hitter to boot. Rogan was. And how about this? He was a 10-second man. He could run a 100-yard dash in less than 10 seconds. Now, somebody knows Babe Ruth couldn't do that. Okay? And neither can Shohei Ohtani. But we know a man who could. Wilbur Bullet Rogan. That's why I talk about him. And that's his wife there. I think I would say one thing about her. I would hate to be sitting behind her this morning in Sunday service. She was from Catherine. She's from Calker City, Kansas. And of course, this is one of the teams, the last one to come through here. And I write about this in my Buck O'Neill book. And whenever the Kansas City Monarchs came, they brought Hall of Famers. So Hilton Smith's in the Hall of Fame, and John Buck O'Neill is in the Hall of Fame also. These are just some of the people. Willard Brown is in the Hall of Fame. And this is, they played a game here against the Chicago American Giants, and they hit 9 home runs in a doubleheader. If you like home runs, you should have been there that day. And that's a picture of Buck O'Neill. And they said of the 9 home run balls went sailing over the board fence in the far side of the field and was lost in the woods. I remember Papa Bell told me he had a home run in Oxford, Nebraska. And he said he hit it so far in the field, they said the guy on the gate said, well, they won't find that one till harvest time. And these are the last 2 guys that came up here. There's Willard Brown there. Willard Brown came to the Negro Leagues in 1934, 35, and he played all the way to 57. He was a good hitter in the Hall of Fame. And I asked Willard Brown, I said, hey, Willard, I said, why'd you quit? He said, well, if I had got some glasses, I probably could have played 5 more years. He couldn't have played 5 more years. And Ted Strong there, he was a member of the Harlem Globetrotters. Yeah, he's a basketball player. And of course, here's Buck O'Neill. That's my wife there. That's my son there. And this is part of a book that I have up there. It was the first baseball book ever with QR codes in it. So you can scan those QR codes, and you can hear me interviewing Buck O'Neill in 1986. That's pre-Ken Burns. Okay, and that wraps her up, and I'm going to close with some poetry, and then I'm going to run upstairs. Now, I have to ask if you have to do me a favor, because I have to go to the baseball game and play today, right? So sometimes when my books are in the back, I can't get to the back to sign a book. So you got to let me get to the back, all right? So I'm going to run up the steps right here, okay? And then I'll catch you in the hallway, all right? But many times I get stuck right there. That's why I put the table on the books right here. So anyway, I want to thank you all for coming today and taking a little bit out of your precious time. Yeah. We're gonna close with a poem called "The Stars That Did Not Shine." It goes something like this. I'll use some of the names from today's program. My name is Chet Brewer. My name is Norman Turkey Stearns, but my age is way beyond. I spent my prime in baseball shoes, but my sporting days are gone. Now I'm just one more forgotten face among the black face teams. An old dark horse, they came the course they called the Negro Leagues. Well, I worked the fields in North Dakota, but I dreamed of better days. So I left the plow, the picking bag to join the homestead grays. And all summer long, we played the states, then headed south for fall. Through rain and dust, we rode the bus so we could play baseball. And we played for love and we played for pride and we seldom made much more. The bread, the beans, the hotel bugs, the roads where crowds don't roar. The all-night rides, the seedy side came with the life I chose, but we made do and we came through because darn it, we were pros. And we played in the shadow of the Babe, Lou Gehrig, and the rest, and then stood behind that big league fence while they were called the best. Well, we played them well and we gave them hell with every hidden pitch. Then stayed behind that color line and watched those boys get rich. But did they see Josh Gibson throw our Satchel, throw his stuff? Or can you imagine how bad it feels when your best is not good enough? When clouds roll in across the sky to hide the brightest moon, that's when you'll find some stars don't shine. Some folks are born too soon. So God bless you, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, and all. You wore our numbers on your backs when you played big league ball. And every time you hit one out, slid or laid one down, you carried us from that old bus to the halls of Cooperstown. Now, my name is John Buck O'Neill. My name is Hilton Smith. And you might not remember that. I'm just one more along the score who played with ball and bat. But everyone, when you seek out heroes and you praise this great pastime, remember those old brown-faced pros, the stars that did not shine.